Hello, everybody. This is Skip Elsheimer. Welcome to the AV Geeks Lunchtime Streaming Show. I'm at the archive today because I had to take out the trash and meet some clients, etc. Microwave some Chef Boyardee lasagna because I have one last can of it. Assorted things that we do here at the AV Geeks Lunchtime Streaming Show. Besides watching old 16mm films, we just watched the Hypnotized Cowboy, which is a very odd title. But I love the fisticuffs, man. I love a good silent film cowboy brawl. Your best entertainment value there. I know you're asking, what about drinking? Let's find out. Let's see if this is pro-drinking or anti-drinking, or does it straddle both? Let's see what happens. Take it away, Centron.
This isn't a very unusual scene. You've probably been to parties like this yourself. Lots of them. A bunch of us kids get together at somebody's house every now and then, and there's music and dancing and just general fun. The only thing different about this particular party was what happened to spoil the good time everyone was having. It all began when the telephone rang, and Susan went to answer.
Hello? Yes, this is Susan. Wait a minute, will you? I can't hear a thing. Hey, Jerry, I'm on the phone.
Oh, all right.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Hey, who cut the music?
Jerry, now what did you say? When? Who was driving? How bad was he hurt?
Somebody got hurt.
Well, thanks for calling. Oh, yeah, some of them are here. Sally, Jack, and you know the gang. I thought Bob and Ted would be here, too. I bet they wish now they had come. Yeah. Well, I'll see you tomorrow. Goodbye. Well, who was that? It was Betty. She and Dan were on the way to the movies when they saw this accident. It was Bob and Ted.
Hey, Bob and Ted have been in an accident?
Were they hurt? Bob and Ted didn't get hurt. It was someone else, a pedestrian. Bob was driving and Ted was with him.
Gosh, I bet they feel awful.
They ought to. The police found a bottle in the car.
Oh, brother, they're really in trouble.
Well, it serves them right. Anybody that'd be dumb enough to drink.
Nobody should drink and drive.
I mean, there's no excuse for drinking under any conditions. That's just what I've always thought. Drinking's just about the worst thing you can do.
Hey, now wait a minute. Who said anything about drinking? I thought all you said was they found a bottle in the car. Was there anything said about whether Bob and Ted had been drinking or not?
Betty didn't say that.
Yeah, it looks like you're pretty quick to condemn Bob and Ted. I thought they were your friends.
I'm not either condemning them. I'm condemning drinking. That's what I said.
You did not. You said anybody would drink at all, didn't she? And we were all talking about Bob and Ted, and that's who you were talking about, too.
Yeah, Sally, how come you say that? You're prejudiced.
I am not prejudiced. It's a fact. Alcohol is poison, and you know it.
Hey, now wait a minute. Let's not get all riled up about this.
Well, she started it. Some of us don't feel the same about drinking as she does, and she knows it. She's just trying to find an excuse to tell us what we ought to do.
Oh, you make me so mad. I guess what you mean is you just... Sally, don't get mad. Jack didn't mean anything. Gosh, how do we get off on this anyway?
Well, that's what I say. Well, if people are friends, they ought to be able to talk about something without everybody blowing their tops.
Gosh, yes, Sally. I'm sorry. I didn't really mean to hurt your feelings. You see it one way and I see another.
Well, now, that's more like it. Now, come on, Sally. Jack said he was sorry, so let's just forget it.
Well, okay. But I still don't agree with him. I still think drinking is wrong.
Well, that depends, Sally. Jack's not asking you to change your mind. After all, we just got
No, but tell me one thing. What's so wrong with drinking? What have you got against it?
Well, in the first place, everybody knows it doesn't do you any good. It can ruin your health.
Is that what you believe? Do you believe that old scare stuff? Pooey.
Well, maybe you're both right. A lot of people drink occasionally, but I guess it could really fix you if you concentrate on it.
Sure, just like a lot of things. Pickles. You can't say pickles by themselves are bad for you, but if you eat too many, you get sick. It's the same thing with drinking. You drink so much that you don't get the vitamins and stuff you need, and wham, you get liver trouble or something. All I can say is alcohol can't be as bad as some people think it is. My folks don't think it's poison either. Well, you should have heard what my dad had to say about this the other day. We got to talking about alcohol.
You see, Jack, an occasional drink never hurt anyone. Sure, liquor can cause you plenty of trouble. It'll make you drunk if you drink too much of it. And I think it's criminal if anybody drives after he's been drinking. But let me tell you something. A drink before dinner in the evening is just about the best thing I know of to settle your nerves and give you an appetite. My father always had it around the house, and we've had it. And I don't object to your taking a drink once in a while, but I just don't want to ever hear of your being drunk.
And my dad wouldn't tell me I could drink a little if I wanted to. Not if it's as dangerous as you seem to think it is.
How do you know you won't get drunk?
Look, I'm no baby. I know what I can do and what I can't do, even with drinking.
Oh, I've heard that before. Anybody that drinks will talk like that.
That's just the kind of talk that'll get you in trouble. If you don't think alcohol will hurt you physically, what about the way you're likely to act? You can't say it doesn't affect your actions. And I know somebody who'd back me up on that. Reverend Brewster. He was talking about it recently at young people's meeting in the church.
I believe in freedom for young people. You should make your own decisions, but only in the light of all available facts. And I don't see how anyone who knows and understands all the facts can condone the use of alcohol. It is a question of right or wrong. For the things people do when they have taken alcohol are not directed by the clearest thinking and the most conscientious judgment. Spiritual values and human dignity are forgotten. That's why the use of alcohol is wrong.
And that settles it for me. As far as I'm concerned, it's wrong. Well, Sally, I go to church too. And in my church, they don't say it's wrong to use alcohol. Whether you drink or whether you don't drink is up to you. Getting drunk is something else again.
Well, how do you feel about drinking, Susan?
Actually, I don't care one way or the other. Drinking just doesn't interest me. My folks serve drinks once in a while. They never told me that I couldn't drink. I'm just not interested. But it's all right with me if other people want to. That is, if they behave themselves.
What about the people who become alcoholic? Doesn't that bother you, Susan? Why, these alcoholics, they...
If you mean my dad, go ahead and say it. Sure, he's an alcoholic. Everybody knows it. I'm used to it. When a member of your family gets that way, you try and hide it at first, but you can't. You might as well face it. When Dad found out what was wrong with him and started taking treatment, our whole family got educated. Dr. Brune spent a lot of time helping me to understand. We had a long talk about people like my dad.
Alcoholism is a kind of illness that affects different types of people. We're not entirely sure why some people who drink become alcoholics and others do not. We do know that most alcoholics can be helped, can recover through proper treatment. Your father's illness involves more than just his use of alcohol. Most drinkers can control their drinking. Alcoholics cannot. Your father is one of them.
My father's just one of those people who couldn't control his drinking.
Then I think you'd be afraid to drink.
Just because my dad's an alcoholic doesn't mean I'm going to be one. You don't inherit alcoholism, according to Dr. Brune. No, sir. That's not going to keep me from going along with the gang.
That's what I say. If you want to be one of the gang, you've got to act like one of the gang. You don't want people to think you're a square, do you?
Do you mean to say you think you have to drink?
No, but...
I don't drink, and I get along all right with the gang.
Sure, but
Take this gang here. We have a lot of fun when we're together, but my folks would take a dim view of my coming if there was drinking.
There are plenty of guys who have a drink with their families, but when they get outside the house, they drink deliberately, just to get high and put on an act. I think that's what our parents are concerned about, as much as anything.
You're the only one, Jerry, who hasn't stated his opinion. Haven't you got anything to say?
Well,
Yeah, boy, everybody else put in his 2 cents. How come you're holding out?
I'm not holding out. I'm just listening.
Well, come on, let us in on it. How do you feel about drinking?
Well, now, that's a pretty hard question to answer.
Why? Nobody else seemed to have any trouble, although we don't all agree.
Say, you know, that reminds me of...
A hard question to answer. The kids don't realize it, but this is the first time we've really said what we think about drinking. Listening to what all of them think and believe, I'm not exactly sure where I stand. With most things, there's a hard and fast rule. Either they're right or they're wrong. And most everybody agrees as to which is which. But drinking, who is right? Sally? We all know where she stands and her reasons.
I think it's wrong. I believe what Reverend Brewster says. I think drinking is wrong for anybody.
On the other hand, Jack's opinion doesn't seem too unreasonable.
And my dad says a drink now and then never hurt anybody. And I think if you want to be one of the gang, you've got to act like one of them.
And Tom, although his father's an alcoholic, he doesn't seem to be afraid of becoming one himself.
The chances of being an alcoholic don't worry me. Some people can drink and some can't. You can't blame it all on alcohol.
Susan doesn't seem to be for either side, but she did bring up a point.
In my church, they don't say the use of alcohol is wrong in itself. Personally, I don't care one way or the other about drinking. But it's all right with me if other people want to. That is, if they behave themselves.
Some of the kids feel you've got to drink to be one of the gang.
That's what I say. If you want to be one of the gang, you've got to act like one of the gang. You don't want people to think you're a square, do you?
Do you mean to say you think you have to drink? I don't drink, and I get along all right with the gang.
Well, I think our parents are concerned mainly about kids who drink deliberately, to get high and put on an act.
It's not a simple question, is it? There seem to be many different opinions, even among our own gang. Each one of us must make up his own mind. It isn't easy. What do you think? What about drinking?
So this predates the Jackson Junior High series by at least 20 years. This is kind of an interesting rarity. So, well, it's not a rarity for Centron, but for a lot of educational film companies, they don't have that open-ended, what do you think, to encourage the class to discuss. Traditionally what it is, around this time, it was all very, here's the information, you see through the eyes of somebody, they learn or they experience the problems of alcohol, and it's not a debate. It's certainly not a debate among young people, so we don't really see that with other educational films, and really until the late 60s, early 70s, like you did with Jackson Junior High. So I think it's kind of fascinating. All right, this film is weirdly poetic in my mind, and also they don't, someone reads the credits to this kind of folky music. It's really fascinating for given what the film is. It's Corrosion. Enjoy.
This film, Corrosion, The Chemistry of a Menace, was produced at Canisius College, Buffalo, New York, under a grant from the Niagara Frontier Section and the sections of the Northeast region of the National Association of Corrosion Engineers. It was prepared under the guidance of Drs. Frank Denham and Joseph Biron by Teresa Amabile, a senior chemistry major at Canisius College, Diane Cookfair, a senior at Kenmore East High School, and Michael Shanks, a senior at Maryville High School. Corrosion, The Chemistry of a Menace, is presented to alert high school students to the possibility of corrosion control as a career field.
I didn't even know places like this existed.
And this plant was operating just 12 years ago.
How did things get so bad anyway?
This specimen's in such bad shape, I'm going to have trouble even handling it.
You mean for your project on corrosion?
Uh-huh.
It's a little scary how quickly it happened. 12 years ago, that was a busy plant.
Well, corrosion is a very common problem. I never really paid any attention to it before I started gathering specimens for this project. But going home today, just look around you. It's literally everywhere. Almost anything made out of iron will corrode when exposed to moisture and air, anything from a ship in the harbor to your brother's swing set. In fact, it's so common that 20% of the iron produced per year goes to replace iron corroded away.
But if it's so common and so expensive, why doesn't someone just stop it?
It's not that simple. Corrosion occurs almost anywhere there's moisture. The more moisture, the more likely it is to form. I set up this demonstration just before you came to show the conditions necessary for corrosion. I prepared a solution of cupric chloride in one beaker, an equally concentrated aluminum nitrate solution in the other, and suspended a strip of tin in each. Let's take a look at them. It's only been 5 minutes, and already the tin from the copper chloride solution shows heavy corrosion. However, the tin strip placed in the solution of aluminum nitrate shows no reaction.
Why did corrosion happen in the first solution and not in the second?
To answer that, we have to look at the electromotive series. This series is a table showing the elements in order of reactivity, the most active being lithium at the top of the series. Here's an example of a very reactive metal, sodium. Since it is found so far above hydrogen on the chart, it corrodes very quickly in the presence of the water molecule. now find tin on the chart. It's below aluminum but above copper. That's why tin corroded in the copper solution but not in the aluminum solution. A metal can only corrode in the presence of one which is less reactive than itself. In the copper chloride solution, the tin is replacing copper. Tin starts with a charge of 0, loses 2 electrons, and ends up with a charge of +2. These 2 electrons are taken on by copper, which goes from a charge of +2 to 0. The copper is reduced, that is, it gains electrons, and the tin is oxidized, it loses electrons. The reduction reaction is a copper ion plus 2 electrons yields an atom of copper metal, and the oxidation reaction, an atom of tin metal minus 2 electrons yields a tin plus 2 ion.
Well, I didn't see any copper chloride floating around rusting that old factory you found. What does all this have to do with that?
Maybe this will help you understand the correlation. It's a galvanic cell I set up a few days ago, and it works by the same process as corrosion, but here it's used to create an electric current. I placed a zinc strip in a solution of a zinc salt and a copper strip in a copper salt. The salt bridge allows slow passage of ions, a wire completes the circuit, and the voltmeter indicates electron flow. Zinc has a greater tendency than copper to give up electrons, so electrons released at the zinc flow to the copper through the conductor. This means that the zinc is called the anode, or positive electrode. Here, zinc atoms are oxidized. They give off electrons and form ions. The electrons flow through the conductor to the copper electrode. The copper cathode is negative because of its excess of electrons. Here, copper ions take on electrons to form copper atoms. In other words, they're reduced.
But I don't see any little wire connecting the different parts of that rusty car across the street.
Maybe the anode is just the place where corrosion happens, and the cathode is the part of metal right next to it. So it's really like a galvanic cell, but without the wire connection. Kind of like a short circuit. Well, what makes one section of metal become the part that corrodes in the first place?
Oh, many things. A small impurity, a scratch, a slightly different environment. Any of these could differentiate two sections even though they're right next to each other. In a rusting piece of metal, there are lots of little anodes and cathodes all over, so small you can't even see where they are. For the corrosion of iron in the presence of an electrolyte, the iron is oxidized according to this half reaction. This happens at the mini-anode area. At the same time, oxygen molecules dissolved in the water are being reduced at the mini-cathode like this. Oxygen plus water plus 2 moles of electrons yields hydroxide ions.
Oh, I see. If you add those two equations and then let that product react with oxygen and water, you get rust.
Fe, OH, taken twice, a solid, plus oxygen, a gas, plus water, yield Fe, OH, taken 3 times, a solid.
Now add all the steps together for the overall reaction. You can see the importance of both moisture and air to the rusting process. The final product will be the loose, flaky, reddish-brown substance we call rust.
I guess I knew that's what causes rust, but I'd never seen it before in equation form.
You said before that electrolytes are necessary for iron to corrode. I've forgotten what electrolytes are.
An electrolyte is a substance whose water solution conducts an electric current. Common electrolytes are acids, bases, and salts. In the case of a rusty ocean liner, the seawater contains salt, which acts as the electrolyte.
Is that why salted roads are bad for cars?
Yes, the salt that's used on roads in the winter to melt the ice serves as a very good electrolyte and helps to accelerate corrosion. Another thing that causes a lot of corrosion on cars is mud. That's because mud often contains salt, and the piece of metal under the mud is getting less oxygen than the metal around it.
Why would that cause it to corrode?
If you remember back to our discussion on the corrosion of iron, you'll recall that oxygen is reduced at the cathode. So the area with high oxygen concentration becomes the cathode, and the oxygen-shielded part under the mud becomes the anode and rusts. Rusting is especially costly to the motorist. There, do you see that car outside? That motorist has a real problem. It looks like he's got almost every conceivable rust problem. Let's go out and take a look at it. You can see that these paint blisters leave small areas open for corrosive attack. This means water and salt can get in, and since this spot is more open to oxygen, the metal around it under the paint will rust. There are many bolts and crevices around the headlight assembly to collect moisture and cause oxygen shielding. A number of areas of the car are involved in this problem, such as the joints connecting the bumper to the car body and the taillight cavities. Water collects between the floorboards and the mats and rusts areas near the door. And the wheels kick water up into the fender supports. In fact, any area that isn't uniform, like that crumpled fender, is a trouble spot.
What can you do to keep cars from corroding?
Well, first of all, you can dry your car after it's gotten wet, or at least leave it out in the open to dry rather than in an unventilated garage. This will keep the dampness out of the motor and other hidden areas of your car that are especially prone to rust. And many drivers are careless about opening their door into someone else's car. If your car is scratched with a Parker's nick, get the scratch painted as soon as possible. Otherwise, rust may begin under the paint surface. Paint is a mixture of many different things. It includes a binding medium, that is, any substance which will stick to the metal surface as a thin film and prevent corrosion. Natural oils are often used in paint to protect the metal from direct contact with water and oxygen. Many auto paints also contain metals, such as zinc, whose oxides provide a protective film. Corroded trim also used to be a big problem, but new trim is stainless steel with an aluminum core. When corrosion starts, the aluminum corrodes and leaves the visible part rust-free. This method of protection uses what are called sacrificial metals. Zinc, aluminum, and magnesium are used to protect iron because they're more active than iron is. When placed next to it, they will become the anode and corrode rather than the iron. Here's a demonstration I set up several days ago to show the action of sacrificial metals. In a liter beaker, I placed some soil and saturated it with water. For the sake of accelerating the corrosion, I added some salt. Next, a strip of magnesium and an iron nail were connected by a conductor and both were inserted into the soil. Here's what happened. The more active magnesium became the anode and corroded preferentially to the iron. This method is used to protect underground pipelines.
Is there more than one kind of corrosion?
Yes, there are many different types. The simplest to talk about is uniform attack, where there's an even depth of corrosion over the metal surface. Then there's cracking, which is due to the joint action of corrosion and mechanical stress.
I visited Arizona last year, and I didn't see anything like this. How come?
Well, first let's review the conditions necessary for corrosion. Of course, moisture, oxygen, and an electrolyte are necessary. Also, the metal corroding must be more reactive than the element it's replacing in solution. Finally, the area with lower oxygen concentration will become the anode, while that with more oxygen won't rust at all. Recent studies reveal that pollution also has a serious effect on corrosion. One study showed that an industrial community has 17 times as much rust-producing fallout as one of identical size without heavy industry. When chemical waste is dumped into lakes and rivers, they become much better electrolytes because of the acids, bases, and salts in industrial wastes. Also, sulfur oxides in the air form sulfuric acid in the presence of water vapor. Let's take a look at a map which shows where all these conditions are worst in the United States. The degree of corrosion depends mainly upon the humidity and pollution levels in an area. Therefore, the coasts and areas around the Great Lakes are prone to the most severe corrosion. Along the southeastern coastal cities, such as Norfolk, Charleston, and Miami, the corrosion is bad because of high humidity. The northeastern coastal region, including New York City and Boston, are problem areas because of high humidity and industrial fallout. The next most corrosive area is immediately adjacent to the coasts. Cities such as Seattle, Portland, and Washington, D.C., and the large section between the Great Lakes region and the southern coast. Here there is high humidity and industrial fallout. Corrosion is more mild in the areas adjacent to the ones just mentioned, and western states like Utah, Arizona, and New Mexico are most free of corrosion because the air is very dry and there's no great industrial fallout problem. But corrosion is still very serious almost anywhere you go. Throughout the world, corrosion engineers devote all their research to this problem and its solution.
You've mentioned a couple methods of protection from corrosion. Are there any others?
There is one important method of protection I haven't mentioned. Some metals are protected just by the nature of their corrosion products. For instance, a piece of aluminum can be polished so much that it may be used as a mirror, like the one in that restaurant across the street. Within just a few days, it will be covered with a whitish film. This is its corrosion product, an oxide, but once it forms, it protects against further corrosion. Unfortunately, the most common metal in use offers no such self-protection.
If I ever thought of corrosion before, it was something common and unimportant. I never realized it could be so drastic.
Active corrosion is taking place in working facilities as well as in those that are shut down. The discipline of corrosion control is infinitely more complex than has been shown in this film. The control of corrosion through the proper use of materials, coatings, inhibitors, or cathodic protection is very successful, and through education and scientific investigation, progress will continue to be made in this challenging field.
Oh, wow. That guy is talking like this, and he's kind of talking, and there's no level of enthusiasm to his voice, and he just keeps talking. Yeah. Anyways, but what a weird film. I love it. A film that's made to get high school students interested in the science of corrosion. Plus, sacrificial metal. All right. Here's I don't know if this is a Jam Handy film. My Dad's Company. Enjoy.
Mr. Chairman, judges of the Know Your City Oration Contest, ladies and gentlemen. For the subject of my oration, I have selected My Dad's Company. My father has one of the most important jobs in the city. He's an overhead lineman for the Detroit Edison Company. And while it is true that my dad's job is extremely important, my many, many days of research throughout the various departments of the Detroit Edison Company made me realize that there are other departments that can be considered almost as important as the overhead lines. That ought to get 'em. The committee goes for that stuff about doing lots of research.
Ready, time for bed. Okay.
Scram. Ever since the Edison Company was founded in 1886, it has supplied low-cost electricity for light and power to an ever-growing list of customers. Today, it serves more than 3 million people, supplies 95% of the power needed to run Detroit's great factories. Hi, Dad. Just practicing my speech for the oration contest.
Fine. Sounds pretty good. Is it all finished?
3/4 practically. I've changed it though, made it a lot broader in scope.
Oh, a lot broader in scope, huh? Well, maybe that's a good thing. Only I thought your story on Electricity, the Silent Servant wasn't bad.
Yes, but nowadays everybody knows about that. Everybody knows that electricity lights the house, makes the toast, shaves your face, curls your hair, wakes you up, keeps you warm, heats the water, cooks the food, runs the radio. Runs the electric train, and even warms the baby's bottle. See what I mean, Dad? And that's only part of the list.
Maybe you're right at that.
Of course, I was going to end up with a point of economics.
Point of economics?
Which is that even if everything in the house is run by what I call a silent servant, electricity, it only costs about 30 cents a day. And for an average home, it only costs 11 1/4 cents a day. See what I mean about the point of economics?
Yes, but if you want to talk economics, why not talk about the real point? Not what electricity costs, but what it saves in work, efficiency, safety, time, and so on.
Yeah, that would have been okay. But I've got a better idea, a new one.
What's the new idea?
It's based on this picture chart here. You be the audience, and I'll try it out on you. Electricity made by the Detroit Edison Company is the product of coal, air, and water. These three elements are brought together in each of the company's 4 big steam power plants, which are located on the waterfront at Marysville, Connors Creek, Trenton Channel, and Delray. To produce electricity in 1 year alone, almost 3 million tons of carefully selected high volatile coal are brought to the company plants by trains or boats. Then it's transported into the power plant, where the coal is crushed and made ready for the giant boilers with their big furnaces. Some of these burn as much as 20 tons an hour. In other words, nearly 1 pound of coal is burned for every kilowatt hour that's generated. And for every ton of coal that's used, the power plants pump 1,000 tons of river water. In fact, the task of condensing the turbine steam requires 3 times as much water as metropolitan Detroit uses each day. Each of the 4 power plants is equipped with many big steam turbine generators. These are the machines that actually make the power, the electricity. The amount of electricity generated in the company's 4 hydropower plants is relatively small, actually less than 1% of the total. Next door to the big power plants are what is known as step-up stations, complicated structures of steel with transformers, copper cables, and heavy overhead lines. The purpose is to raise the voltage or pressure of the electricity in order to most efficiently send it along its way over the miles and miles of high-tension wires that carry the power to the cities, towns, and villages. Next, the power is delivered to one of the company's 12 big step-down transformer stations. Naturally, the voltage has to be reduced before it can be used in the farms, factories, stores, and homes. So, the big transformers in the step-down stations reduce the voltage and again send the electricity on its way along the overhead lines and, whenever necessary, through the costly underground cable system. Then it goes to one of the neighborhood substations, where the voltage is again reduced. From here, the electricity at proper voltage is distributed throughout the community. Naturally, it takes a tremendous amount of special equipment for the Detroit Edison Company to supply electric service to its millions of users. And that leads me right into the next part of my oration.
And what do you have in the next part?
I found a lot of interesting information on the back of the company's magazines. See, now I want to talk about equipment. For instance, look at this. The company has to stock over 15,000 individual items. These vary from a common pin to a transformer that costs more than a house. See, Dad, there's a lot of good stuff here. Look at this one. There's enough wire in the company overhead lines to go around the equator 3 times. Boy! And it takes 3,500,000 gallons of insulating oil to fill the company's transformers alone. And look at this one. More than 5 million trees have to be kept trimmed so they won't damage the overhead lines. And look at this one on the number of lamp bulbs exchanged.
Wait a minute, son. Is all this the kind of stuff you're going to have in your speech?
Sure. I spent a lot of time gathering all this information. I know how many trucks they have, I know how...
But this is what I mean. After all this research, it's too bad you didn't see the company. Especially since that's what you said you were going to write about.
But this is all about the company. I said I
Look,
was...
son, here's what I'm getting at. The Detroit Edison Company is more, much more than just a big collection of costly power plants, buildings, trucks, transformers, and other electrical equipment. The thing that makes a company, any company, the thing that gives it, well, that gives it character, is the people in it. And you didn't say a word about them. For example, you talked about the big coal piles instead of the men who handle all that tonnage. That takes skill. It takes skill to pack all that coal into piles that are never too high and yet getting as much coal as possible into the storage space. If you'd taken the time to talk to those men, you might have found out how important that job is. Those tons of coal have to be properly packed to avoid fires from spontaneous combustion. And while we're talking about skills, while you were in the power plant, you should have watched the men getting ready to start the fires in the big furnaces. Those furnaces are so big, the men get right inside and do the job right. And you have to know your stuff to run those boilers in a power plant. You have to know when to feed in more coal and when to cut it down. You have to have enough steam ready at all times for the turbines, ready and at the right pressure too. And did you listen to the hum of those big steam turbines? Probably didn't mean a thing to you. But to the men on duty, it means plenty. After years of experience, they can tell by the hum alone that all's well. Number 1 and 2 are turning at full generator speed. Number 3 is gradually picking up speed, ready to come in on the line with extra power. And how do they know that extra power is needed? Well, remember the central control room in the company's main office? It's quite a setup. On that one big board, you can see the entire high voltage system covering over 7,500 square miles of southeastern Michigan. And just by looking at the lights, you can tell what turbines are running in each power plant. You can see the stations, the substations, as well as all the main transmission lines. But here again, it's the men on the job that count. It's the experience and skill of the dispatcher and the men who work with him that makes all this mean something. The best way I know to describe the load dispatcher's job is to say that he has to order the amount of electricity that the customers are going to need. Whenever a customer closes a switch to start production in a factory, turns on a range to start breakfast in a home, that customer is demanding the immediate delivery of electricity. And because Edison electricity can't be stored, must be made the very second it's used, it's the load dispatcher's job to order it for them and have it ready for split-second delivery. And how does he do that? Oh, but wait a minute. I could spend all day talking about the load dispatcher and his job. See, in addition to everything else, he has to watch the weather, the temperature, the date, the holidays, the clouds, and 1,000 other things. Because all those things influence the amount of electricity the customers may demand at any given time. Why, the load dispatcher even guards the accuracy of your electric clock there. Now, you said the Edison Company had a reputation for dependable service. Well, it's men like the dispatcher, the people who know their stuff, that make that possible. Just by looking at this one book, you can see that there are people with special skills all through the organization. Take the department heads, the managers, the men who actually manage the company. Apart from the skills it takes to operate the business for the investors, the people like me and the other stockholders, the managers have to decide on company policies, hire and train the right kind of people, people with personality as well as ability. And according to this book, they have to plan ahead for the future. Be sure that the company's finances, equipment, and facilities are big enough to handle all the power needs in the foreseeable future. I guess that takes experience as well as skill. Again, for instance, take the people who do the planning for the construction department. They're mechanical, civil, and electrical engineers. They're artists and architects. They design and plan the company's buildings, power plants, district offices, and lots of other things. There's plenty of skill there. Or take the map-making department. We have to have thousands of maps and blueprints showing every street, road, and alley in the system. We have to have up-to-date detailed maps of every foot of overhead and underground line system. And believe me, I know these detailed maps help plenty when it comes to giving dependable service. And how about the men in the meter department? All the meters are tested at regular intervals and, when necessary, repaired. I understand it takes people with the skill of a jeweler to adjust the meters, and every one is checked for accuracy against special instruments certified by the United States Bureau of Standards. And while we're on the subject of skills, the men who trim all those millions of trees you mentioned have it. They're trained in the necessary techniques of forestry. Working under the direction of governmental foresters, they always try to preserve the natural beauty of the trees they trim. You've watched the men on my crew, the Hot Stick Gang. That job takes a little knowing how to. In fact, it takes a good many years training to be a qualified lineman. But a lineman needs more than skill to do his job. After a little practice, the boys learn to handle the live wires with tools that are built into the end of long sticks. But the important thing is the teamwork that you need up there. You cooperate with each other, work as a unit. And what's more, you never get careless, because those are live wires up there. Yeah? You'd have found all kinds and types of special skills around the company if you'd looked. But as far as I'm concerned, I think the thing that counts most with practically all the Edison people is their attitude, a kind of pride they take in their work. I don't know, you might even call it spirit. But whatever it is, you can sure find evidence of it all over the company. The folks in the customer service offices have it. It's a friendly attitude of helpfulness that, well, for the lack of a better way of expressing it, seems to go beyond the line of duty. You certainly can see it with the people in the district offices, and it's more than just common courtesy and service. You can find a good example of what I mean in the people in the company's farm service department. They don't stop with just doing a job of helping the farmer with his electrical problems, because the farm serviceman is more than an advisor. He's a friend, and often a mighty helpful friend, too. Any of the farm servicemen I've ever talked to get a real kick out of their jobs, being friendly and giving extra service. That's what makes a company what it is. Our lamp and cord exchange is an example of the company's extra service policy. And so is the policy of repairing customers' electrical appliances. I heard that during 1 month alone, the boys repaired nearly 29,000 toasters, kettles, coffee makers, electric flat irons, waffle irons, and even electric clocks. And another example is the home service department, where the advisors hold cooking schools for customers or experiment in preparing well-balanced meals in the company's model kitchen. Whenever the customers ask for them, the home advisors call and make recommendations for better lighting or demonstrate the best methods of operating ranges, ironers, or any other home appliance. That's certainly extra service. And the point is, most of those extra services are provided without extra charge. After all, it's just good business to help customers to get the most out of their electrical equipment. And as far as the emergency services are concerned, it doesn't matter whether it's day or night. The switchboard is open 24 hours a day.
Detroit Edison, Service Department.
All the lights are out in my house. I think it's a fuse.
May I have the address, please? Nearest cross street?
And the servicemen are always on call, ready to make emergency repairs or replace fuses as fast as humanly possible. When we say our customers have a minimum of interrupted service, boy, that's what we mean. That's one of the main reasons why line crews are on 24-hour duty too. Many of our trucks are equipped with shortwave radio, and when we get an emergency call in the case of a sudden power failure, fallen wires, or a pole down,
KQB 284 to 47, 14126 Rockdale, pole broken by motorist, wires on ground, new pole for replacement on the way.
we go into action pronto. Yeah, it's just as I said, son. After all, it's the people who make a company what it is. Oh, sure, a company needs equipment, the best and most efficient there is. And also, a company needs good operating policy. But it's training, experience, and skill, and the spirit of the people that counts. Anyway, all that is what I see as the Detroit Edison Company. Just ordinary folks like me who work there. You see, son, it isn't the fact that the company, or a man for that matter, is big or has a lot of physical possessions that counts. The thing that matters is how well you do your job. Just how you cooperate with everybody else you work with. Just how much you contribute to the enjoyment of living right in your own community. In other words, both a company and a man should always be judged, as I see it, by just how well they stack up as a good citizen. See what I mean, son?
My God, the dad is just as tedious as the son. I can't believe he chided him and then replaced it with some even less interesting information. Certainly, I think electric power is fascinating, but boy, did they not capture it. It left me, ugh. Anyways, thanks so much for watching today. Very much appreciate your eyeballs. Tomorrow, where am I going to be? I don't know. No idea. It'll be great. Maybe I'll be here at the archive. Maybe I'll be at my house. Maybe I'll be somewhere else. Who knows? It's exciting. More exciting than talking about corrosion or electric companies. Thanks. If you like what you saw, or like the concept of what we're doing here, hit the thumbs up button, hit the like button. Even if you've done it recently, do it again. YouTube loves to eat your thumbs ups and your likes. It has a steady diet of that. And then somehow that poops out an algorithm that will show films to other people who aren't you. And maybe tomorrow I will talk about the film that has now gone viral on my channel. It is, again, baffling. And so maybe I'll show that film because I don't understand it. But there you go. Anyways, you can also contribute to us by using the Super Thanks button. the ko-fi.com/avgeeks button, the patreon.com/avgeeks button. Those are all great ways to support us. But even just showing up and commenting, we value your opinions. So much so, I'm just going to say, go vote. Figure out a plan. Take some friends, some family. Make it a fun thing. My wife and I go to this really nice pastry place that's near the early voting site, and we have some delicious pastries to celebrate democracy. So please vote if you haven't already. Do it before it becomes a deadline, and then it'll be done. You can tick off that list. Very important, and I'll talk more about that as we get closer, because voting is important, and there's some people who don't want you to vote. I want you to vote. So anyways, everybody have a great rest of your Thursday, and we'll see you next time. Everybody take care.